Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking about big trees of Sandy Springs here today on this beautiful winter afternoon in Georgia. Well, housekeeping. This is how we're going to provide a good service for all of us here online. If you have questions, you click on Q&A. Everything's going to be recorded in YouTube and Facebook, and you'll get a follow-up email as well. And we'd like to have you fill out the survey at the end so we can find out how we're doing and what we can do in the future to do classes for the community. Thanks. Okay, first of all, who are the Master Gardeners? This is a program that's put on by the University of Georgia through the Extension Cooperative Office. And, if you've ever called and had a question about what's going on with your turf or why you can't grow tomatoes in the shade, for instance, because that's what my mom wants to know, when you call the office, you get a Master Gardener. It was an intensive 3-month program that I went through, that we go through, and I learned a heck of a lot, and I'm glad to share this information with everybody. That's one of the reasons we're doing these the lecture series. And they're all free classes. As Master Gardeners, we're in charge of some gardens in North Fulton. We have 6 gardens, and then we're also responsible for a few gardens in some of the schools in the area. We have children's gardening classes as well, and we do provide some scholarships, which is a wonderful thing to give, another way to give back. This is part of the spring lecture garden series for 2021, and we're about halfway through. As you can see, we've had a pretty broad range of topics. The next one after this one today will be next Sunday at 2 p.m. It's all about perennials. If you want any other information or to register, you go to mfg.net and click on the community classes. And please join us. They're fun, they're free, and it's a great way to learn more. You can also follow us on all the usual social media outlets, and here's a list of what those are and their addresses and stuff. And when we finish this class today, it's recorded and will be posted on YouTube and Facebook. So welcome Zoom users and welcome Facebook people. Glad to have you here. And again, my name is Katherine Coppedge. I am a Master Gardener, and I've been getting my hands dirty since the 70s. At one point, I had 170 houseplants in my dorm room, which was probably a little much, So like I said, I've been gardening for a long time, and I'm a member of Spalding Gardening Club, and I'm also on the board at Big Trees. I've been on the board since 2006 when Sandy Springs became an incorporated area and broke off from the mothership of North Fulton, Fulton County. And it's the best way to ruin a manicure, and I'm awesome at ruining a manicure. So join me in finding out a little bit more. We're going to talk about big trees, like I said. I'm going to let you know what it is, where it is, why it is, and who the wonderful John Forbes was, because he was quite a unique individual. Unfortunately, I never met him. He died in 2006 when I came on board, but I know his widow and his daughter, and it's been remarkable to learn more and more about him. I'll let you know how the big trees came into existence and what a fight that was, why it's important for us, some of the key vegetation you'll see in the forest, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the trails, because the trails are just beautiful. Every time I go into the forest, I get lost. And in terms of, I talk a lot to my friends in my garden group about how we can increase neuroplasticity. And as an aside, when you go do something you normally do it the other way. I go into the forest and go to the left instead of the right, and I think I'm getting smarter as I do this, but who knows? Okay, so John Ripley Forbes was a gentleman that was born in 1913, and his claim to fame was knowing why it was so important to be out in the natural environment. And we have just been included, our preserve has just been included in the old growth forest network in the United States. And that just happened last month. We're very excited about this. What the old growth forest network is, it protects old growth from exploitation, from being cut down. And it's really remarkable what the old growth network is going to do is cobble together forests in as many of the counties in the entire United States, in every state, to be part of this group where we can maintain and keep these beautiful forests from development. So we're very excited about that. And it increases biodiversity. That's one of the main things it does. To tell you where this is, I've talked to a lot of people and I said, oh, big trees, it's on Roswell Road. And they go, what? Oh, I've driven by that place hundreds of times. It's right on Roswell Road, and it's right next to the annex and right across the street from the Cadillac dealership and the two other car dealerships. It's right next to the Ford dealership. So it's right there. There is a big monument sign that says Big Trees Forest Preserve. So if you ever pass that area and are curious about it, just pull right on in. And it is accessible for the first paved trail parts. And then we have 7 trails with, about 3/4 of an acre is the longest, 3/4 of a mile is the longest trail we have, but it's beautiful and available to everyone. All right, I wanted to let you know a little bit about why we want to go outside. And when I found this statistic out, it was amazing to me. 93% of us spend 93% of our time indoors. There's a huge problem with obesity now and diabetes and other health concerns because we're just not getting out like we used to. You get up in the morning and you brush your teeth and you get your coffee and you get in your car and you drive to your office and then you have lunch. You might have lunch at your desk and you get home and you take the dog for a 15-minute walk because the dog needs exercise. And then you have dinner and sit in front of the TV or your computer or whatever and go to bed and repeat the process. So we have gotten so cut off from the natural environment, and it's not good for us. Another thing I found out about recently was Biophilia Hypothesis. And that was an interesting concept to me. It's basically, we want to be around other life forms. Biophilia means love of life. And one of the things that we do when we get out in the forest, we're surrounded by living things. And it's amazing what just being outside does. Even if you don't have the time to take to, go for 45 minutes or an hour to walk outside, just going outside and walking down your street, talking to neighbors or not talking to neighbors, can reduce your blood pressure, and it's a way to change your mood. So getting outside, especially on a beautiful day, changes our mood. One of the amazing things when I was doing this research was I was finding out about how it improves our immune system. And there's something called natural killer cells, which I thought was way cool. So it boosts our immune system by increasing the natural killer cells. It also, being outside, also increases our anti-cancer protein production. All good. And again, maintaining a healthy weight is incredibly important for us now. And the amazing thing is you don't have to have any amazing different kind of equipment. You can just go outside in your favorite footwear and get the benefits that we just talked about. Okay, the person responsible for John Ripley Forbes' Big Trees Preserve was a fellow that was born in 1913 in New England. He wasn't much of a student. As a matter of fact, he spent far more of his time outside than inside, which was good for the rest of us. He was a Johnny Appleseed of natural museums. He was responsible for 54 different museums establishments in 41 different states. And at the time, it was a way to bring the outside to people. And he started that way. And he was especially keen on getting children involved in nature. And he realized early on that the playing field really wasn't level. If you were from an urban environment and you were wealthier, you had more access to museums and zoos, et cetera, et cetera. And he wanted to make this possible for all kids to go out and get involved with understanding their natural environment. He was amazing. He was able to get almost 2,500 acres in the Southeast for education and preservation. He was a conservationist of the year, and he was just this amazing fellow that wanted all of us to understand why being outside was so important. He was mentored by William Hornaday, who was the first director of the Bronx Zoo, and this was an amazing man. He met William Hornaday when he was just 15 years old, and Dr. Hornaday became his lifelong mentor, which is pretty amazing. Let's see. Here are some of the preserves and centers in the Atlanta area that you might be familiar with. So besides Big Trees of Sandy Springs, he was responsible for creating the Chattahoochee Nature Center, Autry Mills, which is gorgeous as well, Dunwoody Nature Preserve, Fern Bank, where he met his wife, and Cochrane Mill Nature Center. And again, one of the most amazing things about Mr. Forbes was that he was a natural-born fundraiser, because all these things, he needed to have the funds to develop and create and craft them. And he had this lifelong passion for getting people to understand why nature was so important, and he got them to fund it as well. Okay, this is how Big Trees started. When he was 76, when Mr. Forbes was 76 years old, he saw this parcel of land that was about to go under development. Grove Corporation had optioned it. It was going before the Fulton County Commission to get it rezoned so it could be another car dealership, because it was on Roswell Road right there. There were several other car dealerships, and it looked like the likely spot for another couple of car dealerships. He was able to get the first 10 acres from Grove Corporation, and it was amazing. He actually got them to put a moratorium on developing it until he could cobble together better funding and get Fulton County to agree to purchase 10 more acres. So it took him about a year and a half or so, and it was just, this was his last forest. He was 76 years old, and when most of us have gone way into retirement, he was still thinking about what he could do for our community. And at that time in Atlanta was losing 50 acres a day to development. 47% of the surrounding area had already been developed, and he was aghast at what we were losing hand over fist. So this is particularly poignant for him to establish this one last park in Sandy Springs. Today it's 30 acres, 10 acres of which is owned by the state of Georgia, and that is basically the North Fulton Annex is there. And then the 20 or 21 acres is the forest, and that's what we're talking about today. It's the actual forest with the trails. It's maintained by the Georgia Natural Resources in the city of Sandy Springs. Now, we Master Gardeners take care of 2 beautiful wildflower gardens that are down the main trail, and I've been involved with that project for about 7 or 8 years. And the interesting thing about the wildflower gardens is that as the tree canopy has grown in, it's changed the amount of shade those areas get. So it's really amazing. What used to be on the left-hand side going in was full of flowers, now is more grasses and ferns. And as the sun shifted over, there are more flowers on the other side. So these areas are maintained by us master gardeners. And whenever I'm out in the wildflower gardens and people come by, they're amazed that other people are out there taking care of this part of the forest. And I always ask for volunteers. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I do not. Okay, we take a moment to see if anybody has any questions so far. I'll be happy to answer what I can. Thank you.
All right, Katherine, a couple of questions for you. Are there the trees and the plants, like in the garden that you were just talking about, are they marked so that you can tell what they are?
Some of the trees, we did have a tree service come in about 6 years ago, and the bigger specimen trees are marked. They're at the kiosk when you enter. There are some photographs of the major plants that you'll see on the walk through the forest. So not every single one is identified, but the majority of the big deal ones are identified.
Okay, awesome. And one more. Are pets allowed? So if I wanted to bring my dog and walk through some of the trails, is that allowed?
Pets are allowed and encouraged. Please have them on a leash because we don't want anybody getting into a tussle with anybody else. I would like to suggest that there is no dog poop fairy. And if you carefully gather up your dog poop and tie it up in the plastic bag and leave it in a crevice somewhere for the poop fairy to come get, the poop fairy is not going to find it. Okay, and then you have left dog poop in a plastic bag that's going to sit there for about 250 years, unless somebody else picks it up. So please take care of your dog poop. And plus, we don't want the feces going down into the creeks and streams, because that's the number one way that we get dirty streams. So yes, they're welcome. We love having dogs there. It's a wonderful place for them to go. There are 3 creeks, so there's plenty of natural water for them to drink. And there are some dog water bowls at the beginning of the preserve by the water fountains too that people leave out. So yes, do bring your dogs, bring your children, bring your grandparents, bring everybody.
Got it.
It's family friendly.
All for now.
All right, thank you. Okay, you might want to know why we go out into the forest. It's an amazing, it's a natural laboratory. It's a way for us to understand about how the world around us works. And we are not separate from our environment. We are part of our environment. In the late 1800s, there was a real push to get back to understand how we are so much a part of our natural environment, and having parks and forests and being encouraged to go outside and just experience it has really been on an upsurge in the last probably 30 or 40 years or so. These are some of the things you find out about the forest. The main thing is that it has a lot to do with holding and keeping water and cleaning water before it hits our major waterways. That's what a forest does. That's what soil, one of the main things that soil does. And I'm sure you've been to some areas in Atlanta that are just hotter than other areas, and big parking lots and shopping centers and stuff are far drier and hotter. It's because they're not covered with any vegetation, and the vegetation actually acts as a temperature dampening. It just dampens the temperature. And the main thing that I encourage people about going into the forest is that it's just for fun. Just go out in the forest. It's just for fun. It's amazing to see kids going down to the creek. I grew up I was never inside when I was young. I was always outside. I was always down at the creek. I wanted to see what critters were there. I wanted to find out, about their habitat. I wanted to get lost in the woods. And then this is the mission statement for Big Trees, and this says it all: to preserve and protect this urban forest while linking community learning, health, and well-being to the natural environment. And another thing about why it's important to have this forest is it's watershed protection. I know everyone knows that we get our drinking water from the Chattahoochee River, but the drinking water that we get comes from the watershed, which is all the little streams and rivulets and creeks that feed into the Chattahoochee River. The cleaner they are, the cleaner the river is. And when John Forbes first saw this tract of land in 1989, Powers Branch, which is the main little creek there that you're seeing right here, was absolutely dead. There was nothing living in it. All the upstream construction had silted in the creek, and also the runoff from all the asphalt and streets and parking lots. It was just a toxic dump into the creek. So it was totally dead. Within about 2 or 3 years or so, when our upstream neighbors became better neighbors and were able to decrease the silting, the creek started to come back to life. And now we have many school groups that come down and check out what's growing and living in and around the creek all through the forest, and it's wonderful. When you come to the preserve, there is a 15-stop self-guided education tour. You can download it on your phone and just wander through, and at your leisure, get more and more information and understanding about why this urban gem, because it's only 21 acres and it encompasses all kinds of information, wonderful things you can find out about the creek and the forest. And there's a fair amount of topography. There's an elevation change of about 120 feet, which is, if you go through the entire trail system, it's like going up a 10-story building. Now, you're not going to do this all at one time. Some of the trails are flat. The ones that are along the creek are all flat. But if you go into the back of the forest, you can really get a little bit of a heart pump going there. But anyhow, it tells you, the education tour tells you a little bit about exotic plants and why those are not good for the environment. This was once it was a plantation, it was a cotton plantation. And any of the homesteads in this area, you had the farmhouse, and they were usually planted with big oak trees, because before air conditioning, it was the oak trees that actually provided the cool afternoon breezes here in Georgia. And so on big trees, there are 4 or 5 huge old white oaks. But the settlers and the farmers also planted things that they brought from Europe, from their home. So there's vinca and English ivy and Chinese privet and some wisteria. And all these things are non-native. And what happens when you plant those things in this kind of environment, they take over the natives and choke out all the things that were in the forest before those things were planted. And that decreases biodiversity. And also, these are things that our animals and birds weren't used to eating. So the things that they're choking out, that's a loss of a food source for all the birds and animals. So that's why getting rid of the exotics and getting native plants back in is so important. And we are in the process of doing that. Here's some more. This is the rest of the self-guided tour. And again, it's a way to get you plugged into why big trees is important and how we need to maintain this area, so we can, let everybody know what the watershed does and how the water gets to the river, which is our drinking water. The picture you're seeing here is of the Wallflower Meadows on the right and left, and this is a winter picture, so you're not going to see many flowering plants. But in the spring, in the next 3 or 4 weeks or so, there are going to be flowers on either side. And this is a beautiful, beautiful trail down to 2 of the creeks that are in the preserve. And it's just a wonderful walk through the forest. People ask me what kind of trees are in the forest. There are over 225 different species of trees. Here are some of them. It's a beautiful forest because it's mixed with hardwoods and softwoods. it's got conifers, which are the green all year long, and the deciduous trees. And one of the lovely things about this forest is there's this whole understory of American beeches, and those are the trees that have the beautiful tan leaves all winter long. It's the only thing, it's the only deciduous tree that you'll see in a forest that still has leaves on it. And in the spring, what happens is the new green buds come in and push off the old dead leaves, and that adds to the litter on the forest floor, which just provides a wonderful environment and habitat for all the little critters on the ground. Someone has asked me what my favorite tree was. It's really hard to pick one, but of all of them, I think the winged elms are really, really wonderful. It's a beautiful tree, and the bark is gorgeous and different. I'm sure you know, most people know what an oak looks like. A lot of people know what tulip poplars are. They're some of the trees that grow quickly and take over different areas of the forest. So anyhow, the next time you're in a forest, take a look at those tags when you're walking through big trees and see if you can come up with one that piques your interest. Here are some of the shrubs that we find here at big trees. And again, there are so many of them, and they're beautiful. They come with beautiful different flowers, and shrubs are basically the plants that grow above the ground and below the trees. And shrubs can be as tall as 20 feet tall, or they can be tiny little things that they can be almost like ground covers. So it's a very diverse environment and habitat for them to live in. And we have far more than just these shrubs, but I wanted to give you an indication of what you'll see there. And I was talking about the wildflower meadow earlier. Here are some of the plants and flowering plants we have in the wildflower meadow. And year round, you'll see something blooming. And right now is when the green and gold and some of the beautiful ground covers are just coming back up. One of my favorite native plants is called the mayapple. And it's got this big canopy that looks like an umbrella. And underneath that, in May, hence the name, you get this little bitty yellow apple-looking fruit. And they are beautiful. And then you've probably heard about trilliums, and there are 4 different kinds of trilliums that we have here in the wildflower meadow, and they are beautiful to see. They're one of the first things that come up. I was in Island Ford yesterday hiking, and I saw my first trilliums of the spring. So spring is almost here. The picture to the right is a blue purple flower that's called spider wart. And I thought, that's an odd name for a plant. Why is it spider wart? Couldn't we get a better name? And wart actually means whorl, and the flowers are whorled, so that's why that's named spider wart. The red one is a columbine, which is a beautiful, delicate flower that hangs down below, which is one of my favorite flowers as well. And then we probably have 6 or 7 different ferns there through the wildflower meadow. And the closer you get to the stream, if you see this one, you can see the stream in the background. They're very water loving. So the closer you get to water, the more ferns you're going to see. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, the animals that are there in big trees. And this gives you an indication of what different animals live in that habitat. It's a very diverse habitat. They're mammals, they're reptiles, amphibians, the birds, and then don't forget the pollinators too. But most people ask me about snakes, because as mammals, we're kind of concerned about snakes. There are 46 different snake species in Georgia. 6 of them are venomous, and you got to remember that something that's poisonous is something that you eat that bothers you. Venomous is something that bites you that can bother you. So anyhow, there are 6 different venomous snakes in in Georgia, none of them live in the same area. So you're never going to run into 6 venomous snakes. The only snakes in the Atlanta area that are venomous that you might run into are copperheads. And copperheads, people go, "What? Aren't you worried when you go out into the woods?" Well, in the first place, we're a lot larger than the snakes are, and we can make a lot of noise. Just your footfall going down a forest path scares critters left and right. We are way too big and we are way too dangerous. So for the most part, snakes are going to get as far away from us as they can. The only time I've seen snakes in the woods are when in the next 3 or 4 weeks or so, when they come out of hibernation, they hit that sunny spot. But again, they're going to try to get out of your way. And just leave them alone. We're in their environment, and they're just trying to get by and do their snake thing. So, and actually the snakes provide an incredible, wonderful service for us, because they eat all the stuff that eat the plants that we want. They get rid of the slugs and some of the poisonous centipedes that we don't want in our yard. And the only time I've really seen an interaction between humans and snakes, or dogs and snakes, is when we've gone in to like clear out ivy beds or something that looks like a really good snake habitat. If it looks like a good snake habitat, it probably is. So go in with a hoe or a rake and kind of make more noise. And I've been out in the woods 2 or 3 times a week for 20 years. I've seen snakes a handful of times. I've only seen the copperhead once, and that was on the road going into my house. And that snake was trying to get from a yard into the creek. So they really do stay out of the way. But anyhow, go and enjoy all the animals that are in the forest. One of my favorite are the raptors, the birds that are flying through the forest canopy, and they're beautiful. There are 7 different trails in Big Trees. I told you earlier, the longest trail is about 3/4 of a mile, and most of them are around the different creeks that go through the forest. It's beautiful. The ones in the Big Trees Loop Trail is one of the longer ones. The Back 20 Connector Trail is the longest one. And this is a beautiful forest that's very safe. I have been in the forest morning, noon, and night for about the last 15 years. And it has always been a beautiful place for me to go to recharge and get, shut off some of my activities of daily living. So it's beautiful to get back into the forest. I told you before, there's about 120-foot elevation climb, so it's like climbing up 10 or 12 stories in a building, but you're not going to do that all at one time. The trailhead is handicapped accessible, but after the paved concreted trail, it's not really accessible, so just be aware of that. But there is handicap parking in the parking lot, and there is plenty of free parking. You never have to worry about parking here. I go to a couple of the other parks in the North Fulton area, and like Gold Branch always fills up on the weekend, and there's just not enough parking. So Big Trees, plenty of parking. And here's a picture of the trail system. So like I say, the Back 20 connector is the one in orange, and that basically goes through the entire perimeter of Big Trees. And so you can come in and you can take little kids and go just down to the first creek, and that's probably maybe a 5-minute walk to get down to the creek. So you can come and spend as much time or as little time, and everybody can get their needs met. You can get as muddy as you want to get. You can stay on the trails if you want to do that. But it's just a beautiful spot to come and get out in nature. As I was thinking about talking about Big Trees, there was a book that came to mind, and it's called A Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wollebine. And this fellow was a forester in Germany. And as a forester, he was basically getting a forest to get to the point where it could be cut down and the trees could be used as a resource. And about 20 years ago, he started thinking about trees in a different way. And as he studied more and more about the trees, he realized that the trees actually communicate. They communicate with pheromones. I don't know whether you've ever heard of this, but when a certain tree gets attacked in the forest, it sends off pheromones to the other trees. And what they can do is send out their own venom, in it's not really venom, but their own chemical in their leaves and bark that will keep whatever bugs or critters that are attacking the tree from the first tree to attack the rest of the trees in that group. So that's amazing. So they really do talk to each other. They have their own personalities, which, you know, it was amazing to read this book. They were talking about the trees that drop their leaves earlier than other trees because they simply want to, evidently. And there is another way that trees communicate. There is a whole fungal network. So, you know, we think trees of being, you know, tall and silent and not going anywhere, but they actually do talk to each other through this fungal network called the mycelium that's underground, it's under the leaf litter. And chemically and mechanically, there is this incredible kind of communication that goes on. And trees, certain species of trees, make sure that you know, their sprouts, their seeds and acorns have a better chance of growing into old age than the other trees. They want to get their babies, like an oak tree wants its babies to have a better chance than the babies of a hemlock or something else. So it's an amazing way about how trees talk to each other. And I highly suggest this book. It was really fascinating. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is a concept called forest bathing. It's Shinrin Yoku. And there is a physician in Japan who in the 1980s came up with this concept of getting out in the forest and seeing what it can do for us. And when I first heard about this, I was a good walker through forests, and I was in the forest to get there and get from point A to point B as fast as I could. And I had really good hiking shoes, and I had sticks, and I had, you know, all the stuff to get me through the forest. This is not exercise. It's not hiking. It's not moving through the forest as fast as you can. It's simply stopping, getting out in nature, and using our five senses to really connect with this world. And opening our senses bridges the gap between us and the natural world. So I've taken a number of groups out in forest bathing, and it's phenomenal what happens when you stop and slow down and just take a moment. It's pretty easy. You don't have to have any special equipment to get out into the forest. Just get out there, and the first thing I do is say, leave all your electronics at home. We're not going to take pictures of our forest bathing. We're not going to record our forest bathing. We don't want anything else between the experience and you. So, you know, leave your phone in the car. You get into the forest, the first thing you do is just stop. Just stop. Just stand there for a moment and close your eyes. And just know that you're going to have an experience that is going to be incredibly heartful, I like to say. To stand there, and one of the ways we can connect to the forest with our senses is to just take an inventory. See 5 things. You really see these things. Say out loud what you see. Hear 4 things. Touch 3 things. Smell 2 things. And the taste one's kind of difficult. You can't lick the tree, or you could if you wanted to, but just open your mouth and breathe in the forest air. It's totally different than urban air. And just go slowly. I used to go on walks with my garden club. I remember one time I was out in Smithgall Woods, and we were going to be out there for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And the pace for me was glacial. So I'd go out and then come back and listen to what they were talking about. And I'd go out and come back and listen. And I was missing half of what we were noticing, what we were doing. And finally I slowed down. I learned more in the last 45 minutes of that walk than I learned in every other walk through the woods for the 20 years I've been doing it. So it really had me understand about how to slow down and just take a breath and do something different. Dr. Ching Lee is the man who brought forest bathing to our attention, and the health benefits are pretty amazing. Health benefits are pretty amazing. And he says, set aside 2 hours to really take time to decompress and get out there and go in different times of the day and different types of weather. To be out there first thing in the morning is different than later on in the afternoon, obviously. And you can go by yourself, or you can go with your family members, you can go with friends, it doesn't matter. The whole point is to get out and really experience the forest in a different way and really understand that, again, we are connected to our entire natural environment. We've gotten away from that. And the more we can get back into the forest, get out of the buildings, get out of our homes, the better it's going to make us feel. Here are some of the references from the books I've been talking about. And the spring classes that are next. The next one is the perennials on March 14th at 2 p.m. Please tune in for that. And then we have attracting wildlife and why native plants are so important. And then a spring demonstration class. You can get to these by going to North Fulton Master Gardening.net and click on classes.
Okay, Katherine, just a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
That forest bathing sounds amazing. I can imagine it takes a couple of times to really get into the mindfulness and leave all the work and traffic and all that stuff behind. So here's the first question. That was just my little added comment there. With so much development, how are you protecting the creeks and the streams in the forest?
Well, amazingly, the city of Sandy Springs has pretty stringent code enforcement. And I was in the forest about a year ago or so, and the stream to the north was really silted out and muddied. And so, being the pest that I am, I had my water shoes on. I just walked up the stream to see where the development was, and it was a development north, and they didn't have the silt fences in. So I just called Sandy Springs and said, please come take a look because it's degrading the water quality in the forest. And they were there that afternoon actually, and construction was stopped. It was halted, and they had to come back in. The development company had to come back in and put in silt fences that were going to keep the water clean. And so that was one thing that I know about. But basically, the city of Sandy Springs does a good job with code enforcement. So if you see something, say something. Call them. There's a 24-hour number you can call for Sandy Springs, and they'll find out what needs to be done and do it. And I'm very impressed with them.
Okay. There's a request to go back to the slide with the resources and books real quick.
Okay. Whoops, wrong way. Here you go.
All right, and while they're looking at that, where can we find a list of the plants that are native to Georgia and invasive plants to avoid planting?
Okay, the native plants in Georgia, you can go to the nativeplantssociety.org, and I'm a member of that group too. We rescue native plants all over the Atlanta area. There's also Native Plants of the Southeast. It's a book by Larry Mellenchamp. There is Georgia Invasive Species Task Force, and you can access that by gainvasive.org. And the Chattahoochee Nature Center in Roswell has a list of native plants too, and they have a native plant sale as well. And join our class on native plants coming March 23rd. They'll give you a ton more information, and that's at 7 p.m. on March 23rd. Anything else, Mary?
One last question.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I see trees at the top cut off? I believe that's probably with the top shaved off.
Mistakes have been made. That's a really bad idea. I think there was one lawn company 15 years ago that decided to cut back the crepe myrtles, and then I don't know, it caught on other people. We call it crepe murder. There's no reason to ever cut a crepe myrtle back. If you ever see a crepe myrtle that's been left alone, it's got this beautiful vase-shaped, gorgeous shape to it, and with a beautiful canopy too. If your crepe myrtles have been cut back, you can keep doing that, but they get all knotty and evil looking, I think. I saw some other plants, other trees on the way over here, and they had, I don't know why they had done that, but they chopped off the entire top canopy. And what happens when you do that, there are two main hormones in a tree. There are auxins, which are on the top, which gets the tree to grow tall, and there are gibberellins on the side. So when you take the top of the tree off, it's going to sprout all these little spidery looking side branches, and it's going to degrade the entire shape of the tree. So please don't cut the top of any tree off. It only hurts the tree. It's not going to make it prettier, live longer. It's a really bad idea. And leave your crepe myrtles alone. No more crepe murder, if it's up to me. Thanks.
Agree. Okay, Katherine, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And again, the next lecture is next Sunday at 2 p.m. I'm so glad you joined me. Now get out there, forest bathe or walk through a forest and have fun. Thank you.